Have you ever noticed how often you hear the term growth mindset these days?
It seems like it's everywhere, right?
Everywhere. Leadership, education, even like just trying to pick up a new skill.
Yeah.
But for our listeners who I know are really committed to going deep on things, what does it actually mean for them? Like, how does it actually show up in your everyday life?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's exactly what we're going to try to do in this deep dive.
Uh-huh.
We're going to kind of push past the buzzword level of growth mindset and really unpack it.
Yeah.
What are the fundamentals of it? What are the characteristics of it? What are some of the benefits that it offers? And really, how does it contrast with that idea of like a fixed mindset?
Yeah.
So that's our mission today, is to kind of give you something that you can actually take away and use.
Sounds good.
So maybe a good place to start is just like at the most basic level, what even is a growth mindset?
Yeah, what is it?
So at its core, it's this belief that your abilities and your intelligence are not fixed.
Okay.
They can be developed, they can be grown through effort, through learning, through, working through challenges. And so it really comes down to, for you as an individual, how you interpret those moments when things get tough, when you don't succeed right away.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that as like, oh, this is evidence that I just can't do this?
Yeah.
Or this is an opportunity for me to kind of dig in and grow?
I like that. It reminds me a lot of the core of what our listeners are all about, too. Just this, like, always wanting to learn, always wanting to improve.
Yeah.
Whether that's, like, understanding a new topic or a concept or developing a skill.
Exactly. And one of the things that's so great about that belief is that it leads to resilience. So think about, in your own learning journey, when you hit a roadblock, right?
Okay.
When you encounter a setback, someone with a growth mindset
Yeah.
isn't just going to be like, oh, okay, well, I'll try harder next time.
Yeah.
They're going to say, okay, what went wrong there? What could I have done differently? Are there different learning styles? Are there different resources I can use? How can I kind of incorporate this difficulty as data to improve my approach?
Right. So it's more than just, like, positive thinking or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It actually does have some research behind it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So actually the broader kind of understanding of how our minds work in relation to goals goes all the way back to a researcher named Peter M. Goldwitzer.
Okay.
And his work was back in the 80s and 90s.
Mhm.
And he really looked at how our intentions and the plans that we form shape our thoughts and actions. And he defined mindset pretty broadly.
Hmm.
He said, it's our attitude, it's our feelings, it's our core values. It's kind of like our whole philosophical outlook.
So very comprehensive.
Yeah, it is. It is. And so while mindset is kind of this big umbrella of all those internal frameworks we have, when we talk about growth mindset in like cognitive psychology, we're really focusing in on a specific aspect of that, which is our beliefs about the malleability of our intelligence and our abilities. And for that, we really owe a lot to the work of Carol Dweck.
Okay. Yeah.
She's a researcher at Stanford.
Right.
And her research was really what highlighted that people who have a growth mindset, meaning they believe that their talents and their intelligence can be developed through hard work and dedication.
Yeah.
They tend to achieve more than those who have a fixed mindset, who see their abilities as just kind of set in stone.
Okay.
So that was really the foundation.
That makes the distinction really clear.
Yeah.
So for someone who's listening to this and maybe thinking about, like, where do I fall on this spectrum?
Right.
What are some things they could be thinking about in their own approach to things?
Yeah, and it's important to kind of recognize that none of us exist purely in one mindset all the time. So you might find that you have, a more growth-oriented mindset in certain areas of your life, and maybe you default to a more fixed mindset in others.
Right.
So maybe you're really open to learning new professional skills, but when it comes to something creative, you're like, oh, I just don't have that.
Yeah, I can see that being true for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So keeping that in mind then, what are some of the things that kind of show that someone might be leaning towards a growth mindset in a certain area?
Okay, well, one of the big ones is a belief that your achievements are primarily a result of effort, rather than just kind of innate talent.
Okay.
So think about your own successes, right?
Okay.
How much of a role did your own perseverance, your own commitment play in getting you there?
Right.
Another one is a willingness to learn from your mistakes and to view criticism as valuable information rather than a personal attack.
Right.
So how do you typically react to feedback, especially when it's pointing out areas where you could improve?
Yeah. I'm definitely trying to get better at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, that conviction that your intelligence and your abilities can be developed over time.
Right.
And that ties in really well with, our listeners who are so curious and always trying to expand their understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
They also tend to be very comfortable asking questions and admitting when
Yeah.
they don't know something.
Uh-huh.
It's not seen as like a weakness or an inadequacy. It's just part of the learning process.
Right.
And then finally, they often seek out challenging tasks. They're more willing to take risks,
Okay.
to kind of stretch themselves, even if it means that they might not succeed right away.
Right.
So how do you feel about stepping outside your comfort zone? Trying things that you're not already good at?
It sounds like there could be some big advantages to that.
There are.
Yeah.
There really are.
Okay.
So some of the tangible benefits of having a growth mindset, one that we already touched on is resilience.
Right.
So when you hit a setback, you don't see it as a failure. You see it as a problem to solve,
Right.
a challenge to learn from. And that really fuels your persistence. You're more likely to stick to your goals. You're more likely to see things through.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, especially in, when learning something really complex and you don't understand it right away.
Exactly. Another one is adaptability.
Okay.
So instead of feeling threatened by change or feeling overwhelmed, people with a growth mindset tend to see it as an opportunity.
Okay.
Okay, this is a chance for me to learn new things,
Mhm.
to develop new skills, to evolve.
Yeah.
And that's so important in today's world where things are constantly changing so rapidly.
Right. And it kind of speaks to that idea of not wanting to feel overwhelmed with new information, too.
Exactly. Exactly. And then finally, it tends to lead to a more positive outlook overall.
Okay.
If you believe that you can grow and improve,
Hmm.
then the fear of failure starts to diminish. And that can lead to greater optimism, more confidence, better leadership qualities, and just like a more supportive and encouraging environment, both for yourself and for the people around you.
Wow. So it really can have a big impact.
It can. It really can.
Okay, so that's a great explanation of a growth mindset.
Yeah.
Now, let's flip it over to the other side. What about a fixed mindset? How does that work? What are some of the key differences there?
Yeah. So the core difference is that a fixed mindset operates on the belief that your basic qualities, like your intelligence, your talent, are kind of predetermined and unchangeable.
Okay.
It's like you're born with a certain amount and that's it.
Okay. So that sounds pretty limiting compared to a growth mindset.
It can be.
Mm.
It can be, although it is worth noting that there are some situations where maybe a more fixed mindset might have a slight advantage.
Hmm.
So, in a fixed mindset, there might be more value placed on, being cautious, avoiding risks, focusing on demonstrating the expertise that you already have, rather than venturing into new territory where you might not immediately succeed.
Okay, so it's kind of like staying in your lane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But of course, the potential for growth and development and learning is more limited.
Right. So if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, yeah, maybe I do lean more towards a fixed mindset in some areas.
Right.
Is it possible to actually cultivate a growth mindset?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
The good news is that our brains are incredibly adaptable.
Okay.
There's this concept called neuroplasticity, which basically means that our brains are constantly forming new connections throughout our lives.
Right.
So with effort and with practice, you can absolutely shift from a more fifth way of thinking to a more growth-oriented one.
That's good to know. So how would someone actually start doing that? What are some concrete steps someone could take?
Okay. Well, one thing is to focus on taking small, consistent steps towards your goals every single day.
Okay.
It's all about building those habits, even if they seem really small at first.
Right.
So what's one tiny action that you could start incorporating into your daily routine that would move you in the direction of something that you want to learn or achieve?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Another one is to really consciously push yourself outside of your comfort zone. So maybe you could take on a project that requires you to learn some new skills, or, try out a hobby that feels a little bit challenging to you, or even just volunteer for a task at work that, makes you a little nervous, like speaking up in a meeting or something like
Yeah,
that.
right. Okay. What else?
It's also super important to be patient with yourself, to be kind to yourself throughout this process.
Right.
Because developing a growth mindset, it's not a destination, it's a journey.
Right.
So don't beat yourself up if you, don't see immediate transformations or if you encounter some setbacks. Just keep focusing on taking those consistent positive steps and trust that the progress will follow.
That's good advice.
And then finally, I would say actively seek out diverse perspectives.
Okay.
So read books on different subjects, have conversations with people who have different viewpoints than you do, explore new areas of knowledge.
Okay.
All of these things can help you to see challenges from new angles
Great.
and potentially come up with solutions that you wouldn't have thought of before.
It's almost like, diversifying your learning portfolio.
Exactly. Exactly. And that really ties in so well with our listeners who are, such voracious learners and so open to new ideas.
Right, absolutely. I do remember, though, reading that Carol Dweck herself has kind of cautioned against some of the ways that the term growth mindset has been kind of thrown around.
Yeah, it's become such a buzzword.
Yeah. What's important for people to keep in mind there?
Yeah, so she's actually said that, the popularity of the concept has led to some oversimplifications
Hmm.
and some misunderstandings, which can actually prevent people from fully benefiting from it.
Okay.
So she emphasizes that it's not just about putting on a positive attitude
Right.
or like repeating affirmations.
Right. So it's more than just wishful thinking.
Exactly.
Hmm.
It's really about a deep and genuine belief in the power of effort and learning and perseverance, especially when you face those obstacles and setbacks.
Yeah.
It's about understanding that your abilities are not fixed limits, but they can be expanded through dedication and hard work.
Right.
It's not just hoping that things will turn out well. It's really about that belief in the process.
I think that's a really important point. So to kind of wrap things up, I think it's helpful to just maybe go back to the core of what a growth mindset is
Mm.
and why it might be so important for you as a listener.
Yeah. So at its heart, a growth mindset is this belief that your abilities and intelligence can be developed through dedication, through learning, through persistence.
Right.
And when you have this perspective, it helps you to be more resilient when you face challenges.
Mm.
It helps you to be more adaptable when things change.
Right.
And it just helps you to be more optimistic and proactive in your approach to life in general.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And for you as a listener, you're already so curious, you're already so committed to growth.
Yeah.
Really understanding and nurturing a growth mindset can just give you this powerful framework for, learning new information, mastering new skills, and ultimately achieving your goals.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So now that you've heard all of this and you're thinking about, okay, what does a growth mindset really look like? What does it really mean?
Yeah.
I'd like you to think about how could you apply these principles to your own life?
Yeah.
Maybe not just in terms of, like positive self-talk, but really thinking about like the core of what we talked about today
Right.
and how that could affect the way that you learn, the way that you approach new information, the way that you deal with challenges in your life. And what area of your life or maybe your work would benefit the most from really kind of taking on this new perspective. I think it's something worth spending some time with.
It really is. It's a fascinating topic to explore.
It is. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.